This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and today, well, it's springtime, and actually it's pretty mid-spring, approaching summer for us here in Los Angeles, getting very hot, but it made me think about something that we sim racers often neglect, and spring is that traditional time for spring cleaning of the house, and one thing I thought we should focus on is actually our PC computer box. A lot of what I'm going to be saying is also true for the consoles, but you're not going to want to open them up, but it would be a good time to go ahead and grab a can of compressed air and go ahead and spray out your Xbox and your PS3 as well. A couple of things when it comes to working on a computer, whether you're installing or cleaning it out like we are today. Number one, you definitely want to turn it off. You do not want to work on an operating computer. You will blow it up, or, well, that's a strong word. You can hurt it by doing that. Another thing that's an issue is static electricity. I mean, when you shock your door handle or your friend because you walk by, it doesn't hurt, it's not that big a deal, but some of the internal parts of the computer can actually be completely harmed by that discharge of electricity. So there are a few things you can do. Obviously, you don't want to work in a really staticky environment. You might not want to work on carpeting or something that's going to increase it. Another thing is they do make grounding straps for people who are going to do this all the time, but I'm not going to do that because I don't have one and I don't do this all the time. Another option I've heard is that you can actually just keep a hand on one of the internal framing parts, not the painted surface and not the plastic parts of the case, but on the metal internal parts, and as long as you're touching it, you're grounded, it's grounded. But another method I do know that I'm going to talk about is using the power plug from the computer. And you do want to leave it on. Now again, we don't want to turn on our computer, and we want to turn the rocker switch to the off position so that no electricity is actually going through, but it does maintain the ground line. So right now, this box is grounded, and that's going to help protect it quite a bit. So there are a few things to keep in mind when it comes to spring cleaning. A lot of computers have screens that protect the outside of the case. And you can see mine's not too bad here, but you can see there is a little bit of dirt. There's also a little bit of dirt on the outside of the case. So to do this project, you're going to want a few things. You're definitely going to want to have some air. This is compressed air. You don't want to shake it, and sometimes they'll freeze up and blow water or some kind of liquid or condensation is probably what it really is out of the tube. You don't want to let that happen too much because it will wet down things. It dries pretty well, but minimize that as well. The other thing you're going to need, which I have somewhere around here, is a rag. You want a lint-free rag. Maybe an old t-shirt or something that's been washed a bunch of times, torn up, no lint, no threads coming off of it, so that we can wipe down certain surfaces instead of using our hand like I did there. So I'll make that correction as we get mid-cleaning on this. So right now, I'm just going to put this aside. I'm not going to waste my can air on that because it looks like it'll wipe pretty clean. In other areas, you might find screens on certain computers. Sometimes you have one in the front, covering the front fans and the hard drives. Sometimes you'll also have them on the bottom. So I'm going to flip this over, tilt it up, and you can see down here, I actually have a fan on the bottom of the PC protecting the lower power supply fans. And so this one, you can see a little bit of dust on that. I'm going to go ahead and clean that one off as well. Sometimes they click out, sometimes they just come right out. So now a few things we want to talk about on the inside. All cases open up differently. In this case, it opens really easily just with a, well, come on, boom, and we have it opened up. And there are a few things we're going to want to focus on the inside of this computer. Again, this is actually completely painted, so from what I read, I wouldn't want to use this case for cleaning out, for grounding, I'm sorry. So a few things we're going to want to do. After you've opened the case, it's a good idea to do a visual inspection for larger pieces of dust or debris. Normally in the past, I would start by wildly spraying air in the case, spinning the fans until they screamed, and just blowing out everywhere. But the show's computer tech, Scott McLaughlin, told me that I can actually hurt my fans by doing this and recommended following this procedure when doing a spring cleaning. Inspect all cables, looking for any cables that have been stretched too far and might be putting extra pressure on the hard drives or cards. Also look for any loose wires that may be restricting airflow or possibly fall into a fan. If you're unfamiliar with this procedure, now is a good time to take a photo of the inside of your computer, noting the order of your graphics, sound, or any other cards on your board. I'm going to remove them and take note of their positions and lay them out so they can be installed easily when I'm putting it back together again. I will then remove the RAM chips, also taking note of their position, their direction, and their order. They are also going to be laid out on the table in order to go back in the same order removed. At this time, you have total access to the entire motherboard, chipset, heatsink, and fan. You also have access to the entire back end of the case, including the power supply that you can now clearly see as well. We can now remove any additional dust and use our air can to carefully clean out the board and the rest of the inside of the case. When it comes to the fan, use a straw, a pencil, or a finger to prevent it from spinning. Carefully blow out all of the grooves for the cards and the RAM, and very carefully blow off the main chip heatsink and fan. We can now wipe down our RAM, spray our air through the heat sinks, and reinstall them. Remember to use the same alignment and positions. The same can be done for any other cards going back on the motherboard. And when it comes to the video cards, we clean out the fan while making sure it doesn't spin. Blow air through the internals of the car case, blow it through the heat sinks, and reinstall it as well. Make sure to hook up all the wiring and close the case. So then we just need to install the bottom screen on this particular model and clean up. You can see the dirt there, the front screen, put that back in place. And basically what we have done is we have cleaned up the airflow. I mean, a computer inside is a lot like a race car. You got airflow going from the front to the rear. We've made sure our cables are out of the way. We've cleaned up the opening intakes, like when they go through the grass and fill up the radiator grill, they gotta come in and clean it up. We've cleaned up our radiator grill. We've cleaned up our exhaust ports and letting this thing breathe really nice. And it's gonna make it a much happier computer, and it's gonna make it last a lot longer ultimately, and maybe even prevent a fail in the middle of the race. So ultimately, I hope this prompts you to do a little spring cleaning on your rig, maybe even go beyond the computer and look at some of your other components. Maybe it's time to spray out the pedals, spray out the wheel a little bit. Just, you don't want to get too much dust. You do want to take care of your gear. So this is the first of many computer tech pieces that we'll be doing. I mean, sometimes we'll focus on the sims and the computer tech side on that end, on the software, and sometimes we're going to focus on the hardware. So if you do have any pieces that you'd like us to cover, go ahead and put it in the comments here, and we'll look at it, and hopefully we'll be able to give you that information. Beyond that, we have tech pieces of our own that will be working for you in the future. Until then, this is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.